Hello and welcome to another edition of the Biblewheel program. And we're going to be continuing to discuss the 8th century Irene of Athens and the restoration of icons. And during her reign, she was regent to Constantine the Sixth, which was underaged. But when he became mature enough to rule, for some reason he wasn't able to continue to rule. He wasn't eligible, but he did have iconoclastic views as opposed to his mother, and they fell. His mother and him fell eventually in conflict, and his mother imprisoned him, and even I believe she blinded him, and she reversed the edict, and she called for a council, the Second Council of Nicaea, to reverse the iconoclastic event, and iconoclasm was ceased. It came to a halt for a few decades. Before continuing to the program, let me go back in time in the 7th century when this you'll find in the Wikipedia page of Constans II, Constans II, second, and concerning the name of Thessalonica. In 654, however, Muawiyah renewed his raids by sea, plundering Rhodes. Constans led a fleet attack to attack the Muslims at Phoenike of Lycia in 655 at the Battle of the Mass, but he was defeated. 500 Byzantine ships were destroyed in the battle, and the emperor himself was almost killed. Before the battle, chronicler Theophanes the Confessor says the emperor dreamed of being at Thessalonica. This dream predicted his defeat against the Arabs because the word Thessalonica is similar to the sentence Thessaloniken, which means gave victory to another, the enemy. Caliph Uthman was preparing to attack Constantinople, but he did not carry out the plan when the first fitna broke out in 656, 2 years after 654. Now concerning Thessalonica again, I think this is the first time Thessalonica is mentioned in the Bible. When looking at it in not chronologically, but in the order of the books. So Acts 17, now when they passed through Amphipolis and Apollonia, they came to Thessalonica, where was a synagogue of the Jews, and Paul, as his manner was, went in unto them, and 3 Sabbath days reasoned with them out of the Scriptures, opening and alleging that Christ must needs have suffered and risen again from the dead, and that this Jesus whom I preach unto you is Christ. And some of them believed and consorted with Paul and Silas, and of the devout Greeks a great multitude, and of the chief women not a few. But the Jews which believed not, moved with envy, took unto them certain lewd fellows of the baser sort, and gathered a company, and set all the city on an uproar, and assaulted the house of Jason, and sought to bring them out to the people. Now verse 15. And they that conducted Paul brought him unto Athens, and receiving a commandment unto Silas and Timotheus for to come to him with all speed, they departed. While Paul waited for them at Athens, his spirit was stirred in him when he saw the city wholly given to idolatry. Therefore disputed he in the synagogue with the Jews and with the devout persons, and in the market daily with them that met with him. Then certain philosophers and Epicureans and of the Stoics encountered him, and some said, what will this babblers say? Some, he seemeth to be a better forth of strange gods, because he preached unto them Jesus and the resurrection. And they took him and brought him unto Areopagus, saying, May we know what this new doctrine whereof thou speakest is. Alright, so notice in this chapter, Acts 17, both the cities Thessaloniki and Athens are mentioned. And Thessaloniki is considered to be a place of conflict, as Paul was preaching to the Jews first, and when he didn't receive much attention. But when the Gentiles were preached unto, the Jews that were there stirred up among them from themselves and from the Gentiles who didn't accept the gospel. They began a war, a conflict. And when it comes to Athens, however, Athens is given to idolatry. They had a lot of idols there. I wonder if the 8th century had a similar environment in Athens, because Irene came from Athens. Another thing that comes to my mind when I look at Acts 17, I'm reminded of the 17th century, which there was after the Protestant Reformation, there was a 30 Years' War, and the number 30 and the number 8 are on the same spoke. When you look at the wheel of the Biblewheel, and in other words, 8 plus 22 is 30. And there was a conflict between the Protestants who were pretty much against idolatry, iconodule. They were iconoclastic, I guess, but they didn't destroy icons. They just preached against it, as far as I know. Whereas the Catholics were iconodules. They worshipped the icons or venerate the icons. And going back to Irene of Athens, let me read the following to you. This was partly taken or interpreted from the Wikipedia. This is my summary of it, and if you find more on the link that follows this. After Constantine the sixth's death, there was a darkness of 17 days. The Hebrew word for darkness is choshek, chet word, the 8th letter of the Hebrew alphabet. In the book of Amos, the 8th book of the 2nd cycle, in other words, the 30th book of the Biblewheel, Amos was sent from Judah to Samaria, the northern tribes of Israel, to prophesy there. Samaria had a temple in Bethel built to prevent the Israelites to go to the temple of Jerusalem to offer their sacrifices unto the Lord. This didn't please God. Therefore, when Amos prophesied there, the priest of Bethel told evil things about Amos to Jeroboam II, the king of Samaria. He then told Amos to go back to Judah and prophesy there. So Constantine VI is the son of Irene of Athens, and he was iconoclastic, but Irene was iconodualistic, or an iconodual or iconophile, where she changed the edict, I guess, to allow the veneration of icons. And as far as I know, the number 17 seems to have something in relation to the number 8 or 30. Whereas in Act 17, both the city of Athens and Thessalonica were mentioned, whereas the 8th century Irene is from Athens. Thessalonica was actually mentioned. The First Thessalonians, for example, is the 8th book of the 3rd cycle. In other words, the 52nd book overall, whereas the 2nd Thessalonians is the 53rd book overall, the 9th book of the 3rd cycle. So there might be a connection between all these numbers and 17th century's 30 Years' War. Let me read to you from Amos chapter 5, Amos being the 30th book and the 8th book of the 2nd cycle of the Biblewheel. Chapter 5, verse 8. Seek him that maketh the 7 stars of Orion, and turneth the shadow of death into the morning, and maketh the day dark with night, that calleth for the waters of the sea, and poureth them out upon the face of the earth. The Lord is his name. Verse 18. Woe unto you that desire the day of the Lord! To what end is it for you? The day of the Lord is darkness and not light. Verse 20. Shall not the day of the Lord be darkness and not light, even very dark and no brightness in it? Verses 21 and 22. I despise your feast days, and I will not smell your solemn assemblies. Though you offer me burnt offerings and your meat offerings, I will not accept them, neither will I regard the peace offerings of your fat beasts. Irene, by the way, means peace. Verses 23 and 24. Take thou away from me the noise of thy songs, for I will not hear the melody of thy viols. Verse 24. But let judgment run down as waters, and righteousness as a mighty stream. Verses 25 and 26. Have you offered unto me sacrifices and offerings in the wilderness 40 years, O house of Israel? But ye have borne the tabernacle of your Moloch, and hewn your images, the star of your God, which ye made to yourselves. And verse 27, Therefore will I cause you to go into captivity beyond Damascus, saith the Lord, whose name is the God of hosts. Now let me give you a background of this, why this prophecy was written to Israel. When Jeroboam the first rebelled against Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, Rehoboam wanted to increase the taxes, to make their burdens heavier. But the tribes chose Jeroboam and rebelled against Judah. But because within Judah was Jerusalem and the temple of God was there, Jeroboam decided to make temples or worship places in Bethel and Dan. Even though God was behind Jeroboam in his split with Judah, through the prophets, he didn't support him when he made those worship places in Bethel and Dan. And further on, the one who succeeded him, Baasha, who was king of Israel after Jeroboam's son, he built a wall to separate Israel from Judah, so that the people won't migrate to Judah, or even when it comes to worshiping God, bringing sacrifices to the temple in Jerusalem. He condoned or he supported. He wanted Israel to offer the sacrifices in Bethel and Dan. But that was against God's will, and this is why God is saying these things in judgment against Israel. And this was at the time of Jeroboam II, which is found in the 2 Kings chapter 14 and on. Now, jumping from the books of 1st and 2nd Kings to the 8th century church. What do you think? Do you think that God approved the veneration or the idolatry of icons in the church or in the worship system? Or was he against it? And Irene apparently blinded his son Constantine so that she could continue to reign, and she reversed this edict. And after the death of Constantine, as I mentioned earlier, that there was a 17th day of darkness.